They call it pink gold. Potash is a vital ingredient for growing food, and Canada has more of it than anywhere else in the world, with the largest reserves and production volume. It's now being touted as a secret weapon in this trade war with the United States.
They call it pink gold, this unassuming mineral known as potash, a vital ingredient that underpins the very foundation of global agriculture. In the vast expanses of Canada's prairies, particularly in Saskatchewan, lies more of it than anywhere else on Earth. Over a third of the world's reserves, to be precise. Canada doesn't just hold the largest stockpile, it dominates production too, churning out volumes that make it the undisputed leader in this quiet corner of the commodity world. And now, in the summer of 2025, as tensions simmer in a brewing trade war with the United States, potash is emerging as Canada's secret weapon, wielded not with fanfare, but with a calculated restraint that's sending shockwaves through America's heartland. It all unfolded with a surge that caught everyone off guard. In July 2025, U.S. fertilizer prices skyrocketed by 38% in a mere 3 weeks. This wasn't the result of some cataclysmic global shortage or a devastating natural disaster ripping through supply chains. No, the culprit was far more subtle. A silent decision hatched thousands of miles north, amid the golden fields of Saskatchewan. Buried deep beneath those endless prairies is a treasure trove of potash, and when the 47th President of the United States threatened to impose a staggering 35% tariff on Canadian imports, Ottawa didn't respond with bluster or bombast. Instead, it simply paused. Shipments of potash slowed to a trickle, and suddenly American farmers found themselves staring down a crisis. The lifeline that nourishes the vast breadbasket of the Midwest had transformed into a potent bargaining chip, exposing the fragility of a relationship long taken for granted. This isn't merely a tale of one commodity, it's a broader narrative about how a trusted ally can quietly disengage, leaving a superpower's economy reeling in the aftermath. The drama began not in the marble halls of Washington or the boardrooms of agribusiness giants, but on the gritty loading docks of family farms scattered across the American Midwest. Take the Dwyer family, for instance, stewards of a 500-acre corn operation outside Des Moines, Iowa, for 3 generations. They've weathered droughts, floods, and market slumps, but this July, something shifted irrevocably. Their fertilizer supplier delivered the grim news. Potash costs were spiking uncontrollably, with no end in sight. The son, a 29-year-old with dreams of expanding the farm, hunched over his calculator, crunching numbers that refused to add up. His father, weathered by decades in the soil, gazed out at the fields they'd tilled together since boyhood. In a moment heavy with resignation, they made a decision that echoed through their legacy. They would skip planting part of the West Field for the first time in decades. Stories like the Dwyers are proliferating across the region, a quiet epidemic of deferred dreams and scaled-back ambitions. In Iowa, soybean growers are canceling aggressive planting plans, their fields lying fallow under the relentless sun. In Ohio, cornfield contracts sit unsigned on kitchen tables, gathering dust as families weigh the impossible arithmetic of survival. These aren't scenes of dramatic protests or fiery strikes, they're the subdued adjustments of everyday Americans, tweaking irrigation lines to conserve water for fewer crops, scrapping seed orders that once promised abundance, and whispering prayers that the rains hold off for harvests they can no longer afford to nurture. Behind this understated turmoil lies a stark reality that Washington never fully anticipated. The fertilizer essential to America's agricultural might doesn't originate here. It flows almost entirely from Canada. To grasp the depth of this dependency, consider the role potash plays in the grand tapestry of global food production. Unlike flashy commodities that dominate headlines, think oil or semiconductors, potash operates in the shadows, yet it's the backbone of it all. Over 50% of the world's crop yields hinge on fertilizers, and potash delivers the potassium that makes those fertilizers effective, strengthening plants against disease, drought, and nutrient deficiencies. The United States consumes a staggering 5.3 million metric tons annually to fuel its massive agricultural engine. Yet, domestic production tells a tale of inadequacy. Last year, American mines yielded just 400,000 tons, covering a paltry 8% of needs. That leaves the nation reliant on imports for nearly 95% of its potash, with Canada supplying a whopping 90% of that volume. Russia and Belarus chip in another 12% to 15%, but ongoing international sanctions have throttled those sources, rendering Canada the near-exclusive provider of this critical nutrient. When the 47th president, ensconced at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, proposed that 35% tariff on Canadian goods, slated to take effect August 1st, Ottawa's response was a masterclass in understatement. No fiery speeches, no retaliatory tariffs announced with great pomp. Just a whispered query: what if potash shipments simply slow? The impact was immediate and profound. Prices leaped before the tariff even materialized, creating a ripple that swelled into a tidal wave. Farmers across the Midwest panicked, orders were canceled, and the agricultural calendar ground to a halt. This politicization of fertilizer underscores a profound irony. Despite boasting its own potash reserves in states like Utah, Michigan, and New Mexico, the U.S. has trapped billions of tons underground in a web of regulatory hurdles, environmental safeguards, and infrastructural delays. Meanwhile, Canada exported $4.9 billion worth of the stuff to its southern neighbor last year alone, wielding leverage that's as subtle as it is immense. Throttling supply even slightly could silence farmland from the Dakotas to Illinois, a scenario that begs the question, did the White House truly weigh the consequences? Efforts to bolster domestic production have been piecemeal at best. Early in 2025, the U.S. Department of Energy greenlit a conditional $1.26 billion loan guarantee for a Michigan potash project, promising 800,000 tons annually at full tilt. Impressive on paper, but even that output would replace only a sliver of Canada's dominance, and the mine won't hum to life until after 2026. Then there's the President's executive order from March 20th, reclassifying potash as a critical mineral for national security, a move hailed in headlines but bogged down in bureaucratic inertia. Permits languish, oversight creeps along, and the earth remains untouched. Farmers hear the promises echoed in press briefings, but when planting season arrives, it's the invoices that dictate reality, forcing them to forego fields rather than chase elusive self-sufficiency. In this high-stakes game, Canada holds the aces. It could halt shipments outright tomorrow or squirrel away that $4.9 billion bounty in public reserves, securing it behind financial barriers until Washington blinks. There's no need for dramatics, no gunboats on the Great Lakes, no shouting across the border. Just the potent whisper of scarcity, a force that doesn't grab headlines but can still starve fields and economies alike. The administration's miscalculation seems rooted in a simplistic view of agriculture, treating potash like a backyard crop you can summon at will. But this isn't strawberries or corn on the cob. Potash extraction demands months of drilling, rigorous permitting, extensive trucking, and rigorous testing, all underpinned by millions in infrastructure investment. The executive order nods to these challenges, invoking Section 301 to sidestep regulations, yet the ground remains unbroken, shovels idle. What's unfolding is a pivotal test for Washington. Will the White House deliver tangible results? Fast-tracking extraction permits, pouring investments into processing plants, committing to a decade-long program of domestic revitalization? Or will it persist with flashbulb moments and photo ops, leaving farmers to watch their profits evaporate and their fields lie dormant? So far, the silence from the Oval Office is deafening, amplifying Canada's understated strategy. Ottawa didn't need to shout, it simply stretched the map of possibilities. If the U.S. insists on a trade war that chokes bilateral flows, fine, but Canada can reroute its fertilizer bounty to eager markets in Brazil, India, and China, pause those shipments or declare a national reserve, and the cornfields of America's heartland might fall eerily quiet. Then the question sharpens. Will the 47th president act decisively, or has the administration opted for headlines over harvests? If potash represents Canada's quiet coup in agriculture, its pivot in the energy sector is nothing short of a stealth revolution, reshaping global flows with the subtlety of a shifting tide. Recall the Dwyer family in Iowa, their fields left unplanted as fertilizer costs doubled. Now imagine that same inflationary pressure cascading into scorching July days, manifesting at gas pumps and in swelling electricity bills. The spark ignited on July 17th with a landmark shipment. Canada's tanker, the Gaslog Glasgow, departed from Kitimat bound for Asia, carrying the nation's inaugural liquefied natural gas, LNG cargo. This wasn't just another voyage, it was a deliberate bypass of U.S. shores, a joint venture under LNG Canada that eschewed traditional routes through the Gulf of Mexico, narrow canals, and cross-country pipelines. Instead, this cargo reached South Korea in a brisk 10 days, half the typical 20-day trek from America's Gulf Coast. Visualize the irony. While the 47th president tweets triumphantly about energy dominance, Canada is methodically constructing terminals and redirecting supplies, delivering a quiet rebuke to unfulfilled pledges. The president's campaign centerpiece was cheaper gasoline through an Unleash American Energy agenda, yet reality bites harder. In June 2025, electricity costs surged 6.7% year over year, more than double the general inflation rate, pinching families already stretched thin. U.S. oil producers, battered by volatility, are hedging their bets. A Dallas Fed survey reveals half of industry executives anticipating reduced drilling in 2025, blaming trade policies laced with tariffs and uncertainty. Fewer rigs dot the landscapes of Midland and the Gulf, translating to diminished supply and inevitably steeper prices at the pump. Canada, by contrast, isn't idling for market whims or protracted approvals. Its Kitimat terminal, a $40 billion Canadian behemoth backed by Shell, PetroChina, Mitsubishi, and others, now ships 14 million tons of LNG annually. For the first time, Canada is vending energy directly to Asia, not merely funneling it southward. This isn't mere logistics, it's strategic infrastructure eclipsing buzzwords. Add to that the pipeline snaking across Alberta to the Pacific, a project executed with steel, permits and shovels, sans flashy fanfare. Every mile laid declares independence. Canadian oil no longer must traverse American refineries. U.S. facilities are geared toward heavier crude grades from Canada and Mexico, so this diversion isn't just pipe and tar, it's a conduit of leverage. The White House's retort, a grandiose executive order on day one proclaiming a national energy emergency. Such declarations spawn grid assessments and permit reforms, admirable in theory, glacial in execution. Meanwhile, Canadian LNG sails midway across the Pacific, and Americans grapple with wholesale diesel hovering near 8-year highs. Refiners shutter or throttle operations, rig counts dwindle, and families in Ohio swelter under climbing electricity tabs. Grocery hauls inflate, auto repairs defer, all because leadership proclaimed energy independence imminent, only to discover it entombed in red tape. Canada's message resonates most in its restraint. No tweets decrying disloyalty, no press releases on alliances frayed. Just commodities streaming east and west on Ottawa's terms, to global buyers prizing reliability over rhetoric. As the Oval Office occupant broadcasts, the industry's murmur is unequivocal. Canada builds pipelines. With LNG Canada operational, American refiners may soon feel the squeeze, their quotas from the north curtailed. This shift matters profoundly. Nearly 70% of Canada's crude and natural gas still feeds U.S. facilities, but diversification burgeons. When Ottawa courts Asia, those markets pay promptly, sidestepping U.S. middlemen. So what path does the White House chart now? A sweeping blueprint to modernize pipelines, dangle genuine incentives for refining expansion, or persist with pithy tweets on drilling, saddling energy-dependent families with the tab? This juncture tests not slogans but substance. Canada is weaning itself from a neighbor whose leader brandishes bold claims with infrastructure solidified, shipments en route, impacts unfolding. Americans observe at fuel stations, in utility statements as budgets constrict. Whether the 47th president elects action or acclaim, the architect of tomorrow's energy landscape is evident, and it's not the figure in the Oval Office. Retaliation in trade wars, as the manuals suggest, often ignites with tariffs, but Canada orchestrated a symphony of subtlety, extending beyond potash and energy into the robust realm of steel. Envision steel towns in Hamilton and Quebec, where blast furnaces roar anew. Workers reclaim shifts with tentative optimism. This isn't outright defiance, it's a structural renaissance, a recalibration sans the clamor of confrontation. As the 47th president signaled steel tariffs, Ottawa eschewed mirror image reprisals, opting instead for resilience. From August 2025, new import quotas cap steel from non-free trade agreement nations at 50% of 2024 levels, with excesses slapped by a 50% tariff. U.S. shipments, shielded by existing pacts, flow unimpeded, preserving dialogue while neutralizing foreign opportunists. Concurrently, Ottawa infused $1 billion Canadian into its Strategic Innovation Fund for domestic steel, aiming to modernize mills for premium grades, curtail dependency, and bolster margins. A $70 million labor stabilization fund retrains displaced workers and subsidizes wages for up to 10,000 in beleaguered communities, complemented by a $150 million regional aid package, easing transitions for small firms. Meet Claude, a 52-year-old welder from Sault Ste. Marie. Last spring he trudged past dormant cranes and locked gates daily. Now sparks dance overhead, his gaze alight with purpose. "We didn't strike back," he confides, helmet in hand. "We rebuilt. It's not revenge, it's renewal." This measured tactic broadcasts unequivocally. Canada shuns instigating trade wars but refuses confinement. On the U.S. flank, responses to this self-reliant surge have been more proclamation than policy. As of June 2025, American steel plant utilization languishes at 75%, a drop from 2022's 87% peak, hampered by trade ambiguities, escalating materials, and investment droughts. Canada's pivot packs punch. 1 in 4 U.S. steel imports for construction and autos hails from north of the border. Having that could jam production in Michigan and Pennsylvania, inflating costs for cars, homes, bridges, burdening workers and consumers amid a neighbor's fortification over feud. Did Washington foresee this? In February, the president inked a memo urging steel mill growth, sans funding or regulatory ease. 4 months on, no new projects materialized stateside, while Canadian upgrades hummed with innovation funds. Over 20 U.S. modernization ventures stalled, per reports, due to policy murk and incentive voids. Oval Office vows rang resonant on airwaves, yet plants idled, workers sidelined as cameras whirred. Families sensed the sting. A Pennsylvania steelworker lamented to Reuters this spring, "Slogans abound, but prices for parts climb. No new mills, just more releases." That worker now ponders if his plant will complete started orders. Canada's blueprint extends. Public projects mandate domestic steel, from bridge mends to hospital builds. If Ottawa funds it, Canadian steel prevails, a tactile affirmation that sovereignty germinates locally, circulating dollars communally. While the White House tweets of triumphant deals, Canada erects pipelines, dispatches LNG, and reforges its steel spine. This transcends retaliation, its bulwark against tempests ahead. Should Canada wholly revitalize steel and the U.S. idle, repercussions loom: plant closures, job hemorrhages in Ohio and Michigan, pricier inputs for manufacturers, a gradual economic drain on households. Here's the crucible. Will Washington emulate Canada's structural ethos, or default to rhetoric and sound bites? Engineers in Pennsylvania, welders in Ohio crave not oratory but ignited furnaces.